Everyone. Welcome to our annual district and school committee training night. We're going to wait a few minutes till 6:05 to let folks log on. In the meantime, we're putting a link to the agenda in the chat if you'd like to look for that now. We'll start in about 2 more minutes. Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. It's about 6:05 and we're going to start. We want to try to stay on schedule tonight to be mindful of everyone's time. Make sure you see the link to the agenda in the chat if you haven't done so already. My name is Kathy Fleming, and I'm the Director of Local Resources. And tonight, I am joined by Superintendent Dr. Brent Stevens, Associate Superintendent Ruben Aurelio, and Director of Categorical and Special Projects, Lisa Estepin. And helping us out tonight with technical support is Danielle Perez, our BSEP Program Specialist. If you need technical assistance at any time tonight, please use the chat feature. If you have questions related to content for this presentation, please submit those questions using our survey at the end of the session. In response to your questions from the survey, we will create an FAQ document, which I'll talk more about at the end of this presentation. Tonight, we will spend, you can go to the next slide, please. Tonight, we will spend some time hearing from our superintendent about our district initiatives and our budget outlook for next year. This information is important to know for all committee members, as you will all play a role at the site or district-wide level in planning for programs and budgets for next year. After this, we will provide an overview of the various district committees with some specifics on school site council compliance. During our transition time, we ask that you complete the survey so we can gather questions as well as receive your feedback, and that will assist us in improving our future trainings. We will also review information on how to log on for your school site council meeting at 7 o'clock tonight. If you are not a school site council member, you are still invited to attend the SSC meeting for your site as a member of the public and to introduce yourself and your role to your school's SSC. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Stevens. Dr. Stevens.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I'd love, although virtually, if everybody would join me in welcoming Kathy Fleming to Berkeley Unified School District. Kathy is a new face to many of us. It's really wonderful to have her in the district. She is the Director of Local Resources and is now sort of in charge of managing two very key budgets for Berkeley Unified. That is both BSEP, which stands for the Berkeley School Excellence Program, a local parcel tax that does much for our schools and our young people in terms of reducing class size and providing arts and music programming. And then she's also overseeing a relatively new fund here in the district that's called BERA, the Berkeley Educator Recruitment and Retention Act. This passed in 2019, I believe. And now provides additional compensation for all of our educators, making us more competitive in the Bay Area workplace. And in fact, we're seeing the fruits of this particular local resource in terms of a greater degree of staff stability over the course of the last year. So Kathy, welcome to you. Really glad to have you here. And then I also hope you will join me in offering a warm welcome to Lisa Estupin, who is new to Berkeley Unified as well. Lisa is the new Director of State, Federal, and Special Projects. The special projects meaning almost everything else as she is now learning in her role. So very nice to have you aboard. And then one more new face here in the district, and that is Ruben Aurelio, who is the Associate Superintendent for Education Services, a job that touches on nearly every aspect of the district. And so it's really great to have all three of you aboard. Welcome to every single one of you. What I hope to be able to do is talk a little bit about some district initiatives that are taking place, give you a sense of work that's important to the school board, to myself, and to the district. These things will touch on themes and priorities in your own school sites. And of course, you'll be speaking as school site councils about even more than that. If I could ask you to back up one, thank you. Back up one slide, please. There you go. And let's just leave it there for 1 second. What I thought I would do before we jump into priorities, though, is just talk a little bit about this pandemic. To give you an update about where we are as a district, because of course it continues to be the sort of a theme in this year, just like it's been for the last 3 academic years. So I know that it's sort of been a very happy occurrence for everybody, principals, teachers, students, and families, that we're all back together again as a community. As I've been visiting school sites, what I can't help but see is the sense of joy among families and kids. Visiting playgrounds, getting into classrooms, you can definitely feel that the community is back, and the community is really hungry for that sort of camaraderie that comes with being a part of the school community. And at the same time, we're continuing to feel a level of caution. It's been very heartening that together as a community, we have weathered the Delta surge over the first 5 weeks or so of this school year. We're very steadily seeing community transmission rates decline. And it's also been a happy occurrence that over the last couple of weeks, we've been able to loosen up on a number of safety protocols. We've been able to allow school volunteers onto our campuses and into our classrooms again. We're now permitting field trips to outdoor locations, and we've even reinstated assemblies with some level of safety protocol. We're all very excited as well that we appear to be on the cusp of federal emergency use authorization for vaccines for students who are aged 5 to 11. Word on the street is that we can expect federal approval sometime around November 3rd. So that's about 2 weeks from now. We're anticipating that the sort of cascade of approvals to the state of California will be very rapid. And in anticipation of sort of more local approval, we have already arranged with the city of Berkeley to have vaccine clinics for students who are 5 to 11, taking place on a series of Saturdays in November. So the first of these clinics will take place on November 6th, another November 13th, and then again on, maybe off on these dates, the 6th, and then the 2 following Saturdays. We'll be getting out lots of information to you about when and where those things are taking place. But we do hope that you will either take advantage of these free vaccine clinics hosted by the city of Berkeley in collaboration with the district, or that you'll begin to reach out to the location where you acquire healthcare, a pediatrician or healthcare provider, or any one of our local pharmacies we know is also going to be making available vaccines. Here in Berkeley, we've been very proud of a very high vaccination rate. That's true of our community, that's true of our students as well. And we imagine that within weeks, we'll be seeing large percentages of our elementary school youth getting vaccinated. We do have a few things on the way by way of vaccine expectations. So for all students who are unvaccinated by January 3rd, we will be asking those students to be taking a weekly COVID test. That is in keeping with a recently passed Berkeley Unified School District policy that will require either vaccination or testing. And that will be in place for some period of time, likely a semester, prior to the state's enactment of mandatory vaccinations for students in order to attend public schools in person. We're still waiting for information from the California Department of Public Health about those mandates. And as soon as we learn more about those details, we'll be sure to communicate them to our community. So I wanted just to pause before we jump into more educational matters to talk a little bit about the pandemic, give you a sense of where we are, the great progress we've made together as a community, and as well some of the good things that we can look forward to in terms of added precautions against COVID. On one last note, if you are an elementary family and your student was accustomed to riding the bus, we really appreciate your patience with us this week. Elementary families will know that our buses for general education students were disrupted because of an exposure event in our transportation department. And so if you were one of the roughly 1,000 families who made accommodations over the last 4 days and special plans to get your child to school, thank you very much. We really do appreciate your patience and hanging in there with us. So with all of that, we will continue on and talk a little bit about things that have been going on in the district. So in the middle of this very busy period, as we've been together sort of confronting the challenges of COVID-19, we've also been working to enact a series of priorities here at the district office and as well across all of our school sites. I'll move relatively quickly through these things so that you get a sense of sort of the themes that have been important here in Berkeley Unified. For folks who have attended these meetings before, you'll see that there are common themes across each of these activity areas that resonate or echo themes from previous years. So a key priority for myself, for the board, our district office team has been enacting both a resolution passed by the board in June 2020 called Black Lives Matter, but as well pursuing a deepened set of partnerships that seek to support African-American families and students. This particular resolution calls to our sort of assistance, a set of partners, including Young Gifted and Black, STEM Steps, and College Bound to be able to reach out to African-American students and their families to offer particular sets of supports. This also, though, calls our educators into community to experience anti-bias education and couples really nicely with other efforts that have taken place over many years here in Berkeley. There's a parallel priority taking place in the district. This enacted most recently by the board in the form of a resolution and calling for the support of Latinx students. And we've been working with a set of partners to be able to develop and deepen culturally and linguistic affirming programs for Latinx students. This includes the introduction of a program called Puente, first at Berkeley High School in Longfellow, one that we hope to be able to expand to other school locations as well. Our family engagement team got an extra boost over the course of the pandemic and moving into this year. We'll be sharing news with the school community about a new family engagement leader who will be joining the district, as well as sort of upgrades to the team. We've also been investing in a number of programs related to gender equity for folks who have been following along in local media. This again is another topic, or is a topic again of a round of interest among our students, and we're very grateful to them for their activism and for their insights about how we can best support gender equity in our schools. So this includes programs like Coaching Boys into Men, an athlete coaching program that takes on the topic of consent education, and a new comprehensive consent education program featuring a renowned consent educator named Shafia Zaloom, who will be working with our students and families at Berkeley High School. And then to move on, we're also upgrading our business enterprise system. This is not a sexy project, but one nonetheless that is important. So this enterprise system is essentially the glue that keeps all of our sort of HR and business systems working. We'll be moving from one thing called QSS to another cloud-enabled platform called Escape. This is another big lift for our technology team and is coming straight on the heels of a conversion over to a new program called Infinite Campus. Continuing on. We've also been concerned as last year about overall mental health supports in the district for our students. Using COVID money, the Board of Education increased the number of supports available to elementary families particularly. We now have a full-time counselor available on all of our elementary school campuses through a partnership with BACR and a set of other providers. And as well, we've been working on partnerships at the middle school level and increasing capacity through the city of Berkeley for our high school students. We do know that we have more work to do in this area. In many ways, our educators, our principals are seeing feeling the effects of the roughly 18 months of isolation. Families will also be experiencing these effects. And so as we go through this still, we will be attuned to the needs of our community, attuned to the needs of our students, and looking for opportunities to further increase mental health supports. We've been doing important work in the area of early literacy, and particularly to shore up the ways in which our educators support students who have phonological processing challenges. And that might include an even smaller category of students who are eventually diagnosed with dyslexia. So this includes the introduction of a new early literacy screening called DIBBLES that is more on the phonological processing side, upgrades to our assessment system, as well as ongoing support for relatively new programs called Slingerland and Wilson. And then finally, if you caught yesterday's Berkeley Side article about ethnic studies, a particularly well-researched article, we are very proud that we are taking steps towards the creation of a TK through 12 ethnic studies curriculum. This comes on the heels of a new state law requiring within a few years that states offer ethnic studies as a graduation requirement. So all of this work sort of represents an important steps forward for our community, things that we've been pushing forward in spite of the many challenges associated with the pandemic. A few more things just to sort of mention. As we go through our budgeting process, and this will be particularly relevant to all of our district-wide committee members, we will also be sharing with the community more about our budget. And one aspect of our budgeting process this year will include sitting down at the table with all 4 of our labor unions to think about new contracts for the 22 through 24 school year. So that's a project that we're going to take on in collaboration with our unions. It's one that will keep the community up to speed on. We also know that we're engaged now this year again in work to inspect our math outcomes for students. That's a project being led by Associate Superintendent Aurelio and his Ed Services team. And then as well, we've been working hard to improve communications to families through platforms like Remind, Infinite Campus, and lots of ongoing opportunities to come together in online forums like this one. Moving on. So despite the challenges of the last, 20 months or so, really 2 academic years, we do know that there are potentially more challenges in store. One of the sort of attributes of the pandemic that is being well covered in the national media, also true here in California and locally in Berkeley, is that the enrollment in districts has changed as a result of the pandemic and across the state as a result of long-term trends. So what I hope to do over the next couple of minutes is just walk you through some information that I think is going to be sort of more and more featured in community conversations about our budget. And this conversation will be relevant to all of our committee members, whether you're serving on a district committee or a site-based committee. Information about enrollment adjustments across our district and particularly in our schools is very likely to have an impact on the amount of revenue coming into Berkeley in the next year. So let's look at a couple charts and I'll try to walk you through as best I can with some changes that are taking place. So this chart shows an awful lot of numbers, and what I hope to be able to do is sort of draw your attention to just a few key numbers represented here. So what we have is a representation of a number of academic years, starting on the left-hand side of the screen with the 2016-2017 school year, and moving over to the right to the 23-24 school year. And what you'll notice in the first row, it's a green row called enrollment. You can see the number of students who have been enrolled in Berkeley Unified over this roughly 5 to 6 year span, starting in the 16-17 year with 9,655 students. Our enrollment jumped a little bit, and just before the pandemic in the 19-20 school year, we had 9,844 students enrolled in Berkeley. That represents our actual enrollment pre-pandemic during the 6 months before the pandemic set in. The state, recognizing that enrollment went haywire for a couple of years, agreed to what's called a hold harmless period. Essentially, they said that all public school districts in the state of California can maintain revenue in keeping with their pre-pandemic enrollment. And that gave Berkeley and all other public school districts in California this buffer period in which we did not suffer the financial effects of declining enrollment. And there were a number of reasons we think here in Berkeley and across the state that enrollment began to shift and decline in the district. That had to do with, I think, a prolonged period of school closure because of the pandemic. There was an outflow because of remote working opportunities or sort of permissions for a lot of folks here in the Bay Area. Many families experienced both caregiving and childcare sort of challenges that required them to leave this area, or in some cases move in with family members in other areas for caretaking purposes. And we even had reports of families leaving the state for a variety of reasons, including economic ones. We do know as well that some of our families decided to seek out private options during this time. This sort of combination of factors led to a decline in our enrollment. And it is in the 2021 school year that you see that number 9,409 up at the top, sort of right in the middle of that chart. That represents the number that we had used for our current year budgeting. So we submitted that to the state. We built our budgets anticipating roughly a 400 student decline. And then in those yellow boxes, you can see that what actually happened is a little bit different, that in fact, there was a further dip in enrollment. And you can see in the October 1st, 2021 box that our actual enrollment in the district is 9,208. So this is a total of just over 600 students fewer between our pre-pandemic enrollment and our actual enrollment. Now, each student brings in about $10,000 in revenue from the state, and quick math, that's about $6 million less in anticipated revenue for the 22-23 school year. And this sort of forms the core of the financial challenge that we may face next year, given the sort of withdrawal of this hold harmless period, if there's no change in enrollment here in the district. And so why don't we continue on just a little bit, but I wanted to give everybody a sense that this will be the sort of core of the district's budgeting challenges, and those challenges will take the shape of public conversations over the course of the next 8 months. So this chart represents sort of a cheat sheet about the moving parts of our district budget. Of course, our budget is very, very complicated. It's got lots of revenue source, but here is sort of the key elements, key parts of the challenge as it relates to what's called our general fund. So you heard me talk about the difference between pre-pandemic enrollment and the enrollment we expected to have for this current school year, 21-22. That's represented in the first row, the 19-20 versus the 21-22. That total drop in revenue is equal to $4.5 million. Give you a quick perspective, each one of our employees' costs, benefits included, roughly an average of $100,000. So that's about 45 individuals in the district who could potentially be affected, or I should say, that's the equivalent of 45 individuals. Now, the Alameda County Office of Education, the ACOE that you see in parentheses there, is requiring, because of the large size of this potential deficit, that our district engage in budgeting conversations by December 15th to identify a set of board-approved reductions for the 22-20 school year. That means that we'll be having our budget conversations months in advance of what we're accustomed to. And in fact, through October, November, and December, we'll be activating our district committees to begin to provide feedback on potential reduction ideas. There's another important element to all of this, and that's the difference between the enrollment we thought we would get and the enrollment we actually have for this year. That's the second row of this chart, 21-22 projected versus 21-22 actual. So because that's about 200 students less this year than we anticipated, about another $2 million of reductions, and so that sort of forms a second component to our challenge. All told, that's $6.6 million. In potential attendance-related revenue reduction. Now, we do have a few other challenges, sort of moving parts to pay attention to. Another aspect of this last year is that we used a lot of one-time COVID money to build new programs that were necessary for student support. We brought on board some new staff, we brought on board some new partners, and to the extent that we as a community want to try and maintain these programs into the next year, We have about $3 million of new programs on one-time COVID money. Again, if we want those programs, then we'll need to find funding for them. And so we add that there as sort of another element of our budget puzzle. And then, of course, there's always the challenge of increased costs. On an annual basis, we expect the transportation costs, retirement costs for our employees, and labor costs will all increase. And so we don't know yet what those cost increases might look like, but they're added to this sort of picture. All told, we do know that we've got about $9 million at play with respect to just our general budget. That, to give you some sense of proportion, is about 10% of our general fund. So we're talking about a very large proportion of our general fund that we will have to have discussions as a community about over the course of the next 8 months. And then finally, what we don't know at this point is how much additional revenue might be coming to public schools. And so we add there, the final row on this column is that by January, we'll get the governor's budget. That's always an estimate. You can see add COLA. COLA means cost of living adjustment. And so we just don't know what that's going to look like yet. And this might change a few of these numbers in this budget puzzle. So I hope that this is comprehensible at the sort of high level. And what I hope I've done successfully is sort of add some district level overview, both on budget and program and priorities that will be helpful for your own conversations, whether you're sitting in a district committee or a site-based committee. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit about process, how are we dealing with all of this? I did mention that we will be starting our budget cycle this month. We've already assembled internal teams. We've already assembled something called the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee, a group that advises me and the board on important budget topics. And we're planning for our district parent committees to begin to introduce them to some of the district level budget challenges that we'll be discussing over the course of these 2 periods of time, up until December 15th and then up until the end of the year. We'll be offering as well increased reporting to the board on discussions related to the budget. For folks who would like to follow along with the district budgeting process, you can count on frequent presentations to the board. And you can also count on receiving information from me in the form of written letters and updates to our overall community. So please stay tuned for this because we've got a set of challenges in front of us. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy and Lisa. I do very much appreciate the opportunity to give this overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens. So once again, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank everyone for being here. Again, I'm Lisa. I'm the new director of the Categorical and Special Projects Department, and I am extremely happy to be here and be able to provide you support this year. So this slide that I'm going to talk about is going to be reviewing the types of committees that exist in Berkeley and their roles. Kathy and I are going to briefly touch on a few details for each committee. So the first one I'm going to talk about are school site councils, it's actually councils, so school site councils, SSCs, and their roles. So every school site is required to have a school site council. The bylaws exist and provide guidance on how an efficient school site council can operate. These bylaws can be found on the committee, in the committee handbook, or on the school site council website. School site council support tasks such as writing the school plan for student achievement and budgeting certain state site funds, BSEP site funds, and other resources. The next committee that I'm going to talk about is the Parent Advisory Committee, or PAC. The Parent Advisory Committee advises the district on the LCAP. This committee is tasked to consult, review, and comment on the district's local control accountability plan. And then the DLAC, the District English Learner Advisory Committee. This is a district-wide committee that advises the district on services for our English learners. DLAC is also responsible for providing feedback on the district's LCAP. In addition, DLAC is also the district committee that is responsible for formally voting to apply for state federal funding. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy.
Thanks, Lisa. The next committee is the Planning and Oversight Committee, the P&O, which provides oversight for our 2 parcel taxes, BSEP, the Berkeley Schools Excellence Program, which provides funding for small class sizes, music and art, libraries, and other enrichment and academic support programs, as well as site allocations for site programs, and also for BERA, the Berkeley Educator Recruitment and Retention Act. The next one is the SBAC, the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Committee. And that is a committee that advises the superintendent and the board on the annual budget. And now back to Lisa for additional information on school site councils.
Thank you. All right. So as we all know, there are compliance requirements associated with school site councils. A very important task that school site councils are required to take part in is the evaluation of the previous year's school plan. I would like to briefly highlight this tonight and know that this may be new to many of you. I've included a copy that on the slide that you could see of the template here. But each school site currently already has a copy of this template in each of their school folders. So what is the ask for this document? The first ask is to look at your previous year's SIPSA. So in this case, it would be 2020, 2021 SIPSA. You're going to choose 2 to 3 actions that have been fully implemented. Then the second ask is to go back again into the 2021 SIPSA and choose 2 to 3 actions that were not fully implemented. From there, you will know why these actions were not fully implemented. And then the third ask for this document is to note how the school site council was involved in the development, the feedback, and the monitoring of the school site plan. This year, just to put this out there, it is going to be a little bit unique because in Berkeley, Berkeley will be tasked with evaluating last year's SIPSA by December and then evaluate the 21-22 SIPSA in March. Please know that we are here to support you in this work. I will have ongoing SIPSA office hours for your principals, and we, myself, Kathy, and Danielle, will be visiting meetings throughout the year as well to provide support. Now, I'd like to turn it back over to Kathy so she can talk about resources for committees.
Lisa, we want to point out some resources that you have available on our website. On your agenda for tonight's meeting, you will find a link at the bottom of the agenda to the District Committee Training Resources webpage. Included here are a number of tutorial videos on the various types of committees, as well as general information on site budgets and committee operations. On this webpage, you'll also have access to the committee handbook and site plans and budgets for each school. If at any time you have questions about your committee, please ask your principal or your district liaison. We are here to support you in your participation. Our goal is to ensure parents and community members have the opportunity to provide input on our district initiatives and in our budget development process. Next slide. So thank you for coming to our presentation tonight. We're going to have a transition period and we have a little bit of time, about 20 to 25 minutes, for you to get ready for your site council meeting at 7 o'clock. During this time, we asked that you complete our brief survey, and please see the chat for the survey link. Also, the link to the survey is on the agenda. Can someone put the link to the survey in the chat for folks? Using these results, as I mentioned before, we're going to create our FAQ doc, and we will have that posted as soon as we can complete that. Also at the bottom of your agenda is a link for your school site council meeting. If you have any difficulties logging on to the committee meetings, please return to this Zoom and we will ask for help in the chat box, and Danielle or one of us will help you. And remember, if you're not a member of a school site committee, you can still join the SSC meeting for your school. We'd like to thank you all for your participation tonight, and we all look forward to working with you this year.